Animator and story artist Mark Kausler is Missouri born and bred. He came to Los Angeles in the late 1960s and was among the last students at Chouinard Art Institute prior to its merger with CalArts in Valencia, California. Mark has storyboarded on numerous shows and features, but considers hand-drawn animation to be his first love. He is currently working on his second self-produced animated short. We are talking today with Mark Kausler, who has been recommended to me by a variety of his peers, and we're here to talk about Mark, his beginnings, his middles, and what he's presently doing. So, to start off, Mark, you hail from the Midwest, right?
That's right.
And so where did you grow up?
Born in St. Louis, Missouri. I grew up in a little town called Webster Groves, which was a suburb of St. Louis.
And how did you get interested in animation?
Well, from watching too much television.
Yeah,
when I was a kid.
There was a lot of that.
I love Felix the Cat, the silent Felixes, and Bosco, and Porky Pig, of course. Mm-hmm. So my favorite cartoon, probably of all time, was the Daffy Duck, which Bob Clampett directed,
which
is a hospital cartoon.
Those were all on early television.
On St. Louis television, yeah. Yeah, we had a kid show host named Texas Bruce who showed all those things, and the Our Gang comedies, which I love too.
Frank out here doing it,
right?
Tom Hatton.
Gosh.
All the 1950s kid show icons. So.
Yeah, we were lucky. You know, we could see all those things, and we really loved it. Popeye, I loved the Popeye cartoons. Anything black and white. Like now, kids will turn off anything that's in black and white automatically without even giving it a chance.
So it's not even.
To me, the best stuff ever made was filmed in black and white. That's what because it's all story.
Yeah,
they're marvelous. To me, they're marvelous things. Like I love the one where they're deep sea diving and Popeye gets eaten by a clam, and he can't get out for the longest time until Olive pumps the spinach down to him through the breathing tube.
Sure. And then he, the forearms enlarge, and off he comes.
Oh yeah. Popeye was a big idol of mine. My mother hated Popeye because my brother and I, after watching a whole bunch of Popeyes, would start into the fisticuffs ourselves. And she couldn't stand that.
I can see that.
She would forbid
Waddling
Popeye for
behavior.
weeks, then she'd forget, and we'd start watching it again. I also love Bullwinkle. I had to sneak Bullwinkle because my mom and dad thought Bullwinkle was subversive for some reason. So I would go up in the attic and watch it on my grandma's TV set. 15 minutes every afternoon. I love Bullwinkle. Not so much for the animation, but I just loved the character. I loved the voices and the stories. And
what about Crusader Rabbit and Rags the
watch
Tiger?
Those too.
They were sort of the progenitors of.
Now the interesting thing. It's interesting you should mention Crusader because in those days, our local station in St. Louis would just run them at odd intervals. We never knew when a Crusader was going to be on.
Right.
So at the end of each episode it says, stay tuned to this station for the next episode. So I would literally sit there for a couple hours sometimes, waiting for the next one to come on. And eventually come out and say, oh boy, the story continues. But they would never have, in St. Louis, they never had Crusader Rabbit on as a separate program. It was just dropped in here and dropped in there.
Well, they made them in like 10-minute chunks.
Yeah, but it's actually closer to 5, but be that as it may.
Chunks. Yeah, but I know that, I talked to one of the guys, John Sperry, worked on the original show, and he said that they originally worked on them so that they could be segmented down to about 5 minutes.
Right.
And you could string them together and make them a half hour. You could string them together and make them an hour. And so all these stations did it different ways. And I guess in the Midwest, in St. Louis,
that's the way they used them.
Dropped them into little 5-minute segments.
Well, I remember when we only had one station, which was KSD Channel 5. And most of the morning they would run that old Indian head test pattern.
Yeah,
I'd be up at 7 o'clock, and I had to have that Indian test pattern. Crazy
You'd
stuff.
wait for the cartoons to start.
Yeah, and I would wait and hear that that strange audio tone.
Yeah, I remember that.
I must have driven my parents crazy doing that.
That beats us.
Anyway, but I loved those early television years.
Now, so when did you consciously make a internal decision that I want to get into animation? Because I asked that of everybody.
Well, I didn't know I even wanted to do it professionally when I started. I started as a kid in about 56. Making my own cartoons because it just looked like so much fun. Bosco and the antics of Felix and everything, I just had to do something like that myself, and I wanted to figure it out. I wanted to understand why they were doing it. There weren't many books in those days about how to animate. Preston Blair had his book, That was about the extent of it.
Yeah.
So my dad was wonderful with carpentry, built me a camera stand. We had a little Bell & Howell regular 8mm camera, and I filmed many films. I started with my own character.
You shot on 8mm
regular
film,
8mm film.
shooting you had a camera stand, and you shot it one frame at a time.
Right.
Or did you do 2 frames, or did you even know about 2 frames?
Oh yeah, we figured that out right away. But the difference between 2 frames, 1 frame, 3 frames. Sometimes I would have as many as 20 frames for a hold. I was teaching myself timing that way. But unlike the luxuries we have today.
You were, what, 12?
I was 8 when I
8?
started, yeah.
And you kept doing it?
All the way through grade school, high school, through the summers.
So you were basically a semi-amateur, semi-professional animator way back in junior high school and elementary school.
Right. Everything was silent. I had no way of putting sound on anything. I couldn't figure it out yet.
Do you have any of those films?
Oh yeah, they all still exist. I wonder if they'll still run. It's been years and years since I've looked at them.
You should get them shifted onto DVDs while you still can.
I should. My magnum opus was Sing Along with Yogi Bear. I used a lot of other people's characters like Snoopy and Charlie Brown.
But you drew them yourself.
I drew them myself. But Yogi Bear was the first one I'd done which was all cells and all painted in color. And
now,
I was so pleased with that.
How did you get the cells and the paints?
Well, I couldn't afford to buy them. I didn't have any money except my little, I got 25 cents a week allowance. So through a newspaper ad, I met a guy named Tom Goodson, who was an old Fleischer animator. And he was working for a company called Perceptual Development Laboratories in downtown St. Louis. I used to take the bus to go down, and I met with him. And he was very interested in me because he says, there's hardly any young people here that want to learn in-betweening or want to learn animation. I could use somebody. He says, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll train you to do some in-betweens for me, and I'll pay you off in cells.
So no money exchange?
No money at all, but I worked barter system. And I would go down there after school.
12, 14?
I was about 14 by the time I was doing that. I would go down after school, and I'd stay 2.5, 3 hours. Sometimes Tom would drive me home afterwards. Sometimes I'd take the bus. He was a great old guy. You could tell his Fleischer influence because his personal art was airbrush renderings of classical dwarves and interesting fantasy environments like caves with colorful stalactites and stalagmites.
These were paintings?
These are all paintings he had. But I don't think he was animating much personally. He was just strictly he was doing local commercials for St. Louis market.
He was doing animating for that?
Yep. And whatever existed of that, which was precious little.
So you launched in with him about at the age of 14. How long did you and he work together?
It was not even a year, I think. And then actually the company closed. It was a weird company because they had a strange device called the Perceptoscope. The Perceptoscope was long before video cassettes or anything like that. It used 16mm film running horizontally. And it was a little cassette of 16mm film, and the frames were vertical shaped. They weren't even horizontal like frames would be if you projected vertically, if you can picture that.
Right.
It was used for training and educational purposes. And whenever a title would come up, where they have to read, okay, your motivation for sales is to get, 10,000 a month or whatever, that title would hold because it was notched. And then the operator would just press a button, you'd show another burst of frames. And those were our animation, just little bursts.
So it was like sort of a glorified slide strip.
In a way, but it was a combination of slide film, film strip, and motion picture, all in one little machine. I shouldn't say little, they weigh 50 pounds. 50 pounds,
right. And you were telling me earlier you've got one of those in your home today.
Yeah, a friend, not a friend, but a guy read something about me on the internet and noticed that I had worked for them. And he called me up and says, I've got a Perceptoscope if you want it. So I came and got it. I can't believe this monster. Because it seemed small and compact in the day when I was working on it, and now it's this gargantuan monster.
It was probably compact to other things at the time.
Compared with an iPad,
compared to a laptop computer, it's a little heavier and bigger.
Yeah, just a little bit. But that was my maiden voyage into doing anything even semi-professional, was working for Tom. And Tom was such a character, he kept a little flask in his coat. He had a coat hanging on an old-fashioned coat rack, and about every half hour he'd go over and take a little nip, to keep him going.
Yeah, you were telling me.
But he was an amazing character.
Now, after Tom sort of drifted astern and you moved on with your life, what was the next big animation sign?
God, see, I have to look at my sheet to tell you. Well, then I gave up animation for a while. I went to I graduated from high school in '66 and went to Kansas City Art Institute in Missouri, and I thought I was going to take up fine art painting, oil painting.
Yeah.
Well, I stayed there for 2 years, and it was a very strange way of teaching. The instructors would do strange things. They tried to teach us creativity. In those days, they didn't have much emphasis on figure drawing or formal kind of art classes, even though this was an art institute. They tell the whole class, the freshman class, okay, define the area. In other words, define our campus. So our solution to that was take a big canvas bag, sew it all up, and put concrete in one end, and everybody lined up like a bucket brigade and passed concrete from the open end of that canvas bag all the way down to the end. We made a big sort of a snake out of it. We draped it over the trees, all over the sidewalks, all over the...
But they wanted you to do an art project.
Then it dried, took the canvas bag off, and we had this dried concrete thing which defined that campus. And oddly enough, in that same time period was when Walt Disney drove on our campus one Sunday. We thought, everybody said, Walt Disney's coming, Walt Disney. I said, yeah, right. Well, he did come up. He was having a meeting with the dean.
Yeah,
we had no idea why.
That was about a year before he died.
It was 2 months before he died.
2 months before.
This was 67,
I've seen a picture.
68.
I think I've seen a picture of him at your campus. Larry Eichelberry had it.
Right. Yeah, Larry and I went to school there together. That's where I met him. And he was a painting major too. He used to work for Hallmark Cards on the side. That was the main employer in Kansas City. But anyway, Walt came to the campus, and everybody was there waiting for his autograph when he got out of the dean's office. I was the first one in line. He sure did. He signed my Art of Animation book, and I was so thrilled. And I said, gee, Mr. Disney, I always wanted to get in the business. And he said, you want some advice from me, kid? I said, yeah. He said, learn to draw. That's all he said.
Yeah.
Then he proceeded to walk off campus, and everybody descended on him with pieces of toilet paper, old rags. He signed everything. There's some great photos which I wish I had, which the graphic design people did, as they had their old Leica Flexes and beautiful cameras. Followed him all over campus. He had already had a lung removed by that time, still smoking Tipperellos. There's a great picture they took, him parting the trees like this, these skinny trees with a Tipperello in his mouth with a great big scowl on his face. A fantastic picture. God, I wish I had that.
Well, those pictures are extant somewhere.
I hope they kept them. But 2 months later, he was gone. But what a thrill getting to meet him. Gosh, it was so fantastic. I never thought that would happen. But I just happened to be in the Kansas City Art Institute, and that was one of his old schools.
Yeah.
He went there, and in those days, when he went there, they actually taught figure drawing.
Yeah. Well,
but it was considered passé. That was a period of art education where, teaching traditional things was, no, that's... photography is going to replace all illustration. We've got to teach you creativity. So they tried to teach us that.
Okay, so you're there for 2 years, and then you move on to Chenard's in Los Angeles, correct?
Yeah, I was quite fortunate. I came out here ostensibly to visit my friend Manon Washburn, who was a wonderful ink and paint artist. Mm-hmm. I knew her because my dad knew her husband. They had worked in the aircraft industry together. Mm-hmm. So that was the link there. Well, I came out to stay for 2 weeks, and I'm still here. That was since 1968. That was a long stay.
Long stay.
But anyway...
but you got into the business fairly quickly after you...
Well, thanks to Manon, she introduced me around. And the first guy I ever worked for was Gary Mooney. He was working for Quartet, which was Mike Laws and Stan Walsh's company those days. I think Art Babbitt was also an early founder of Quartet Films. But anyway... Gary was working on a Green Giant commercial, and he broke me in doing some in-betweens for him. And he liked what I did. So I kept some of the drawings I made for him. And about that same time, I had kind of a falling out with Mr. Washburn, Manon's husband. He kind of kicked me out. I was staying in his back shed. So I was homeless, basically, for a while. God. And
you were going to Chenard's at this time.
Well, this was slightly before I entered Chenard. This was my first summer out here before I even knew I was going to go to Chenard.
Oh,
I was already starting to pick up jobs and getting to meet people. Well, Fred Calvert, who had a little studio in North Hollywood on Moore Park Street, I forget how I met him. Maybe Manon introduced me to him. But he kind of took pity on me and said, well, you can stay in the editorial building if you want to. He set up a cot, and I stayed there that summer. And I worked for Fred for $2.50 a foot to help pay whatever rent. That was my rent, was working for him after hours on Hanna-Barbera stuff, which he was picking up. During the day, I got a job at Filmation. And all I needed, it was so easy to get a job. I had my drawings from the Green Giant commercial, went in, showed them to Hal Sutherland, and he said 2 words, start Monday. So I came in and started Monday. And I was raw recruit. Didn't know anything about in-between, but I did what everybody else did, which was go to the Xerox machine.
Yeah.
Nobody had 1 second of time to draw that was an in-betweener.
Yeah.
Because we had to get 100 feet out right away. I had 100 feet, what's that? I had no idea that you had to do that much. So I did it. It was basically like cutout animation. You Xerox a whole lot of things, rip the legs off, rip the arms off, and draw. The only guys who had fun...
The animation stock library.
Yeah, well, they did a lot of stock stuff, as you know. But the only guys who had fun at Filmation were the layout people. They got to draw. The rest of us couldn't draw.
Recycle drawing.
Like poor Reuben Timmons, an old-time animator who I worked for, said, God, you kids, you don't know what you missed. He says, we used to be able to draw at Fleischer's, Now look at what I have to do, I can't even trace the layout. I don't have enough time.
Is this before or during or after the time you were at Chenard?
No, this is all before. This is all before I went to Chenard.
Before.
Well, I was lucky enough to meet T. And he saw my student films. And not my student films, but my childhood films.
Yeah,
I ran them for him. And he really, my 8mm films, he really liked them. And he said, you should be here. He said, you shouldn't go back to Kansas City. We can teach you. We can teach you filmmaking, and I'd like to have you here. He arranged for me to get the Bob Cannon Scholarship. And I was very proud to receive it. I met Martha Cannon, and she told me a whole lot of things about Bob, And says, never mention Daffy Duck. Never mention anything funny that he ever did, because he was totally ashamed of it and didn't want to ever be reminded of it. Of course, unfortunately, I never got to meet him. I wish I had.
Well, at least you never did the faux pas of mentioning Daffy Duck.
No. But anyway, then I started at Chenard the fall of 1968. And I worked there making student films.
Now, how did you like Chenard's and their art classes compared to the Midwest?
Well, it was the greatest for me because we had carte blanche. We could do whatever we wanted. Nobody cared. Chenard was closing in 2 years. Everybody knew it was going to go out to Valencia. This was the last gasp of the old guard.
Merging of the old with the new.
I had Don Graham for one of my art instructors.
My God.
Don didn't care.
The old Disney.
He showed up for a couple of classes, and he looked at our work and says, well, looks like you're having fun with it. And he just he walked out and never came back. So we would just teach ourselves. We would draw the model any way we wanted, and we had a good time doing it. But the best thing of all was, in those days, everybody got a little bit of money, like $1,000 or so, to make their films with during the year. Nobody was using their grant money. So I'd go around and say, are you using your budget? Are you using your budget?
I'll take it.
I got people's 3 or 4 budgets, and I made 3 student films with it, with sound, and some were even partially in color. I had such a good time doing it. My senior epic was Mike Mouse in City Life, which was a horrible ripoff of Mickey Mouse. And I animated that whole thing with the help of my friend Mike Sanger, who I met in the freelance trade. And Mike helped me finish that film. And I shot most of it myself on the school's Oxbury. And then I actually hired a guy professionally to shoot it for me because I had all these budgets to work with. And we finished it a day before school stopped. If I had finished it one day later, I would have lost all my money. It was that close. I was so thrilled. I got this thing done.
So that's your first year at Chenard.
It was going to be at the Chenard, the first Chenard, actually it was called the last Chenard Film Show, which was going to be at the Disney studio on the lot. Well, Roy Disney, the old Roy Disney, Roy O. Disney, saw my film and he said, take it out. He said, I don't want that film in the show. Take it out.
What did he object?
He didn't like seeing Mike Mouse, or that looked like Mickey, cavorting with a frog monster, or sort of a frog-made monster with big boobs, living in the sewer system of whatever little city this was supposed to be. There's a lot of things that took place in the sewer system. I did, not real crude stuff, but just in the water and swimming around under there.
So
I had a good time making
that
that
still extant anywhere?
Oh yeah, I still have it. It was made in 16 millimeter. But anyway. So what they did, rather than take it out, was they pushed it all the way to the end of the show, and that was a 4-hour show.
Right.
So by the time my film came up, there was one person left in the auditorium.
Yeah, it's almost like getting rid of it.
So anyway, that was the end of Mike Mouse, but I had a ball making it. It was absolutely great.
So it wasn't ever out of the show. It was just
pushed
relegated
to the end. Yeah.
Okay.
So they sort of semi-defied Roy a little bit, but he was very, very elderly anyway at that
And
point.
he was probably gone by that time, so he never
didn't
saw
know
it.
what was going on. But anyway, so that was Shinar. That was my graduating
So you were just
film.
there for a year?
2 years. And then I graduated actually, I'm getting my time sequence a little off. I graduated in 1970, the spring of 1970.
And were you were probably freelancing in the industry all the way through?
Well, yeah, my dear friend Dwayne Crowther kind of took me under his wing in the Fred Calvert days. And he helped me to animate. At first, I did assistant work for him. I did assistant work. He picked up 5 minutes of Yellow Submarine.
Right, and you worked on that.
Kimmy Calvert and I and several other people assisted Dwayne.
Robert Alvarez.
Yeah, Robert worked on that. And Dwayne liked to work extremely rough. He would animate with a Sharpie and magic markers. And then we had to boil that down so somebody could put it on a cell and paint it, And that was good training. And I did a scene of Jeremy, the little boob character in Yellow Submarine, just with his arm rotating on his rotator cuff, kind of like that,
Yeah, yeah.
And Dwayne helped me with it. He said, no, follow this arc. And he taught me about arcs. And he said, don't worry about the shoulder. He says, this design will accept anything you do. That was the fun thing about Heinz Edelman's designs. You could distort him any way, and it worked. So I had a ball doing that and finishing up for Dwayne. And then we did a lot of stuff for Jay Ward, a lot of Captain Crunch commercials.
Yeah.
And I would help Dwayne with those, because a lot of times at the end of the day he'd be dead tired. So I'd take the stuff and I would drive it over to Ward Studio, and I got to meet Bill Hertz and Lou Keller and all the guys that were working there. And Jay Ward I never got to meet because he had that funny affliction where he was scared to meet new people. It made him nervous. So he just opened the door and said, "Who's that?" I says, "Oh, is he just Mark Kausler?" "Oh, okay." And he closed the door, and that's all I ever saw of him.
So you saw his nose.
I saw his nose. But I didn't get to know Hertz and Lou Keller very well. They gave me a tour of the old studio and everything. Gosh, what a fantastic creative place that
For
must have
years
been.
they had the big Bullwinkle.
Yeah.
over
And that was
Hollywood
done in
out on
answer to, I think, an automobile sign that was across the street originally from it, with a beautiful lady holding up a car in her hand. And the Rocky and Bullwinkle statue was done as a parody of that statue. And
remember
now
seeing that
that's
statue.
been gone so many years, I guess most people have forgotten
Yeah.
the whole reason
No,
for
I
it.
remember seeing it. I only saw it a couple of times. It's not like I got to Hollywood all that often.
Right. But that was a little bit of Jay Ward. So Dwayne really helped me and introduced me around. Then the first regular job I had, unfortunately non-union, was Spun Buggy Works. And I met Frank Terry. I brought my student films in, including Mike Mouse, and he really, really liked them. And it was kind of Start Monday, So I came in, and it was the baptism of fire, because we had to animate a 30-second spot every week. We had to do 45 feet of full animation every week.
It's baptism by strenuous work.
Yeah, the schedules were extremely short. Budgets were very low. I think they paid me $75 a week in those days.
This would have been about 1970.
This was 1970. 1970, spring of 70. So I worked there for almost 2 years, from 70 to 72. And I met some very dear friends there, my friend Mark Rodman and Andrea, I can't remember her last name today, oh well. But so many people I met. I learned to drive. I had been taking buses everywhere up to that point. My friend Mark taught me how to drive. I drove a little Volkswagen. My very first time I tried to park in the employee lot, I hit the editor's car. That car couldn't even judge my distance. And he was so nice to me, he didn't even yell at me. I scratched the hell out of his car and says, "That's okay, kid. He says, better luck next time. He was so sweet to us. The one of the great events that happened, well, maybe not so great if you had to work there, but Herb Stott was the cheapest guy in the world. He and Frank, they wouldn't spend any extra pennies that they didn't have to spend. Well, the place caught fire.
Yeah.
One day when we were at lunch, and we heard, it was up on the Sunset Strip, we heard all these fire engines. Mark and I were out at this place called Mildred Pierce's, which was down below on Sweetser, looking up towards Sunset. Says, now don't tell me the studio caught fire. I said, that can't be. Went up there, god damn it, the place hadn't caught. The editor, Peter, he had one of those little space heaters, Wind came up, blew paper into the space heater, and caught the whole place on fire. His film cement, everything.
It's a good thing that there wasn't nitrate film.
Damn right.
Exploded.
Fortunately, it was safety film by then. But the secretary had to drop to her knees. She was the only one there. Dropped to her knees, crawl out under the smoke, and she crawled out over the roof, because this was on the second floor. She crawled off the DeGrandis tailor shop. She crawled down their balcony, and thank God she was okay. But Herb, the next day, made us come in and work in that awful burnt-out place. We could barely breathe. And we had to work.
The ash up your nose.
I kept telling her, please let me take this home. I can't breathe. She says, no, your contract is you got to stay here, and that's it. So we had to stay there. Finally, they fixed it up. We worked so hard there because, Frank put a lot of pressure on us. After we'd finish a full day of anime, he says, well, they need help in the basement. Everything was on 16 millimeter then. So you guys got to go downstairs and box this stuff up to be shipped to television stations. So we go down and we worked till midnight, 1 a.m., boxing this stuff up.
And then you'd come back the next day about what, 9?
8:30 or 9, yeah. And they had us doing cells. We not only had to animate, but he wanted us to help paint cells.
You painted your cells.
So we did fake airbrush. We would take lighter fluid, dip Q-tips in it, and on the surface of the cell, put a marker down, and we would fan that out with the lighter fluid to make it look like fake airbrush. We did a lot. That was the look in those days. This was sort of post-Heinz Edelman. Yeah. Everything had rainbows, everything looked a little bit Yellow Submarine-ish, a little bit nostalgic.
Late 60s, early 70s, very, what's the word, hippie-ish.
Yeah, and we did a lot of 1930s inspired stuff, like we did Autolite batteries, and the batteries all had pie-cut eyes and marched with little yellow shoes, kind of like Mickey Mouse. And had a lot of fun.
You did one a week.
One a week, but we loved doing. I did a Tootsie Roll commercial with Paul Frees' voice, where the Tootsie Roll divides himself in half and becomes all these different things. It had 1 week to do that, and had a lot of fun doing it. But again, this is this thing we were talking about at lunch. I'm kind of responsible for the first wave of free overtime.
Yeah.
Like $75 a week, Steve, and I would take stuff home.
Predates you.
I would take stuff home every night, every weekend. Sometimes I work late at the studio, but actually I preferred to do the work at home. It was much more quiet and peaceful and didn't smell like smoke.
Yeah.
I could get work done. But then I worked one weekend with my friend Mike Sanger on an outside spot, and I helped him with it. Made $350 that weekend.
Wow.
Doing freelance.
More than you were used to.
Because this stuff paid $60 a foot. And I thought, wow. It just like a light bulb. I could make a living doing this. Right. So I went in the next day and asked Frank, would you mind if I asked you for a little bit of a raise? I've worked almost 2 years, and I'd like to get 125 instead of 75. I thought that was reasonable. He says, you're fired. Get out. We don't want you, and we're not going to pay that kind of price for you. So get out. So I got out, and I didn't know what I was going to do for a while. I stewed around for several weeks, and I thought, well, I'll just try and call people up, see what I could do. And my old friend Jerry Woolery from Playhouse Pictures, I went to school with Jerry, handed me out some freelance on some commercials and a picture called The War Between Men and Women, which was done in Thurber style.
Right.
I got to do the last scene in that, where they're walking away from camera. I enjoyed doing that very much. That was an easy style to do, and it was something I could handle freelance. I did a little dog that follows and yaps after them all the way down to the distance. In the Thurber style. So that was some of my earliest freelance. I got to look at my list here to remind myself all the freelance work I did. I did a ton of it. Let me see. I worked on a picture called The Naked Ape, which I think Johnny Crawford was a star of. That was done through Murakami Wolf. And this was pre-computer. Nowadays it'd be all handled digitally. But we had to do a lot of stuff with a camera eye view, panning along Corinthian columns and Doric columns and up and down old arches showing the history of architecture and how man evolved. And really complicated stuff, a lot of pencil mileage, a lot of hours went into that film. I don't think
what
I
year
ever.
Is that? 72?
This is 71.
71?
Yeah, it was 71, and I animated on that. I picked up on a show from Patty Freeling called Clero Wilson and the Miracle of PS-14. The reason I got that job was I got to know Corny Cole through doing freelance work, and he handed me out some scenes from that. And I really wanted to work at Patty Freeling, but never could get in there. Because again, that was, the greatest generation sort of joined arms and kept a lot of us young kids out.
Well, it's the old glass ceiling. It's the same thing. Once the chairs had all been filled at Disney's in the late 30s, there were a lot of good animators that they weren't going to get into those directing animator slots. Would have taken an act of Congress, and that wouldn't probably have done it.
Yeah.
So it was sort of the way I think the industry went. Newcomers would get shots at newer studios that couldn't get any of the old guys. And I think that's usually the way it went. So we're in the early 70s, so what's
in those
happening
days,
in your career at that point?
Well, I also tried to get, I hungered to go on staff with somebody, and I tried to get work several times, maybe 7 or 8 times at Walter Lantz Studio. And I always would, eventually they told me, well, they would tell me 2 weeks all the time. Then they finally said, well, you're going to have to wait till some of these guys die before we'll ever hire you.
Now, you were telling me earlier, was that Walter that told you that?
No, that was his secretary. I never got to meet Walter at that point. I met him later, though. About the time that Asifa used to do, not the Golden Awards, but the Annie Awards. Originally, the Annie Awards were given to one old-timer. The first recipient was Dave Fleischer. I think the second was Walter. So I was running projector at that thing. I ran 16 millimeter and got some films from my own collection that had little clips of Walter from the old Woody Woodpecker show. God, I loved that show. That show was also very instrumental in me getting interested in animation because Walter showed you how to animate.
Walter was like Walt. He showed up on camera and explained how it was done.
He says with circles, ovals, and a few connecting lines, you can make your own cartoon kingdom. And I never forgot that. That's a wonderful phrase, a very hopeful phrase to build your career on. Well, anyway, I had to bring him back film the next morning after the banquet. I says, I'm going to get a chance to see him. I'm going to talk to him. I was so excited because he was such a big hero, I'm waiting in the lobby of his old studio on Sword. He comes out from the back, and I had this stuff, and I handed it to him. And I said, well, here's your films back, Mr. Lantz. And he kind of looked me up and down. He said, well, just let the old man get back to his spaghetti, will you? And he turned on his heel and slammed the door.
Wasn't in a talkative mood.
So here I was all ready to have conversation, and we never had one. But I did get to see a little bit of the inside of that studio. And I saw their conference room with these beautiful oil paintings that Fred Brunish, their great background, wonderful watercolorist, maybe not as good as your dad, but damn good watercolor. He did these big oils of Woody Woodpecker and Andy Panda. They're gorgeous. And oh, God, this studio must have been fantastic to work at.
Had a long run. I mean, Walter was probably after Disney, well, and longer than Disney because Disney passed away, and so Walter,
he survived in theatricals till '72.
Yeah,
and then kind of hung it up.
And Walt Disney was long gone by that time.
That's true.
So
that's true.
If you want to talk about who was in the business longer, it was Walter Lantz because he was in there in the 20s.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Very kind to his people. He had a lot of loyalty. Like we were talking about, he kept Paul Smith working when he couldn't see. His daughter helped fill out X sheets for him, and Walter still kept him on the payroll.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. There was a lot of paternalism. I mean, I saw, like I told you earlier, Bill Melendez taking on Art Babbitt when Art was really way past his productive years.
Right.
They looked out for each other. They really did. But it was a different industry in those days.
Reminds me of another story, but speaking about Jay Ward, is that Bill Hertz, one time when I was dropping stuff off from Dwayne, he said, kid, come over here. I want to show you something. And he showed me these drawings of Captain Crunch that had incredibly weak lines and very faltering Everything was not constructed correctly, and everything
yeah.
falling apart. I said, gee whiz, what are these drawings? He says, well, we can't use them. He says, you know who made them? I says, no, Bill Teitla.
Yeah.
The one-time, maybe greatest animator who ever lived.
Yeah.
By that point in his life, couldn't even draw Captain
Crunch. He had a couple of
Crunch.
strokes.
Yeah.
That was part of the problem.
But he was still trying to work, God bless him.
And this was like probably 72, 70.
Yeah, roughly.
Right at the end of his life. Because
Yeah.
he tried to get back into Disney's in the last half of the 60s, and
There was no spot for him.
No
then.
spot
It was
for him.
sad. Well, and all through those years, too, I kept applying to work at Disney, and I showed stuff to, what was the guy that used to be their key? He was an old, he animated Peg in Lady and the Tramp. He was a wonderful animator. God, I can't remember his name today. Anyway, Eric Larson. He fell asleep during my sample reel.
well, that's not a good sign.
I had this thing running of my commercials and everything, and he just nodded right off. So I was dead. I was not going to make it.
Hypoglycemia.
But that's how Eric reacted to my samples.
Well,
But anyway, then I worked on a lot of different things. Heavy Traffic I did for Ralph Bakshi. I met Ralph
now how
in
was Ralph to
1972.
work
An incredibly creative guy, wild guy. I don't know how he made those features. No boards. He never had a complete board for any of those features. Most of it was in his head. But Maybelline.
for? So how did you get hired? Did you go in and try out for him? What happened? He showed you drawings?
I just showed him some drawings, and it was another Start Monday situation. He says, I got this sequence, and Bob Dranko had done the storyboards, and it was to Maybelline, the Chuck Berry song. And he says, I need somebody to do this. I don't want it to have in-betweens. I want it to kind of look like a pose reel. So we came up with the idea of having the drawings change on the beat.
Yeah.
Every time a new beat came up, a new drawing would pop up on the screen.
Yeah.
So I had to take on the whole sequence and do all the drawings in it. And originally it was like double X rated. I mean, we had everything showing and everything going on. And his partner, Steve Krantz, got cold feet right around the time we were doing Maybelline. I had finished the whole thing, and then Ralph called me back. He says, well, we're going to have to change some of it and cover up some of this and do this. So I did that. But I think Ralph retained the original version of it just for his own amusement. I haven't seen it since I animated it.
Yeah.
But I had a lot of fun doing that.
Well, you were on staff.
No, I did that whole thing freelance. Never got on staff with him, but I did that whole thing. I think I did the whole job for $1,000. Then on Coonskin, he hired me again, and I did the Malcolm D. Cockroach sequence on that. And that was all inked with Ver 20 cell paint on cell.
Now, were you also freelancing?
Yep. I boarded that sequence too. I boarded the thing and did all the artwork for it. I think that was another $1,000 job. Interesting story came out of that. I was working freelance, and sometimes the trouble with freelancing is you gotta be your own bill collector. Sometimes it ain't easy to collect.
Yeah.
Well,
that's the problem.
Ralph was split from Steve Krantz by that time. He was on his own hook. And admittedly, he had money problems on Coonskin. He was spending a lot of money on that picture.
Yeah.
There was a lot of full animation in it. So he was trying to delay me paint, and I really needed the money. I had come to the point, I got to have this money. So finally, after I don't know how many times I called him, I came to the office and I laid down right in his door, right across the threshold. He had to step over me, I don't know how many times that day. I stayed there several hours until finally he said, all right. And he takes a check and he threw it, take your fucking money and get out of here. So I was at the bank so fast. I didn't trust him for 10 seconds, but it cleared.
So did you work on any of his other films after that, or was that it?
Nope, but I helped get him together with Irv Spence. Like, Irv was my idol as a kid, and I didn't even know it.
He was one of the old MGM animators.
And Tom and Jerry. I loved his stuff on Tom and Jerry, didn't even know he did it. But I met him in 1969. I took an after-hours class at Hanna-Barbera, and he was teaching animation. It was a wonderful class, mostly because he was just reminiscing for the whole 2 hours.
It's that oral tradition.
We shot no video pencil test. We shot everything negative, and it came back the next week on 35, and we would view it on the Moviola, and he would criticize it. One time, Bill and Joe showed up, and they just reminisced about MGM, and I was in heaven listening to them. That was a great class. But anyway, I always liked Irv very much. And Ralph was looking for somebody along his lines, and Irv needed a job, and I said, why don't you call him up? And he did, and they hit it off really well. And Irv had a great time working for Ralph on those few pictures. So that was a good thing that came out of that.
But you were a little too pushy for Ralph's taste.
Well, yeah, he never really put me on staff or anything. But I had a good time working for him for the little bit that I did. Then after that, I did so many commercials, and I'm not even skimming the surface.
You're doing commercial after commercial after commercial now. Almost all of these are freelance,
right? And
you're doing them at home.
And I worked a lot for Duck Soup, Roger Chenard and Dwayne's company. I worked on a whole lot of
this all through the 70s?
All through the 70s. They were in Santa Monica. And I did also work there on staff for a little bit. But mostly I did freelance because just of the sporadic nature of commercials. Sometimes you're hot, sometimes you're not.
Yeah.
So I loved working for them because Dwayne was practically like my dad. You know, I wish my dad had been more like Dwayne.
Yeah.
Dwayne was so good to me.
Yeah.
And always was looking out for me and trying to get me work. What a wonderful guy. I miss him.
Is he still
terribly.
around, or did he pass away?
He died a long time ago. I miss him terribly. But anyway, I met Chuck Jones around that time through my friend Carl Bell. I used to go up and visit Carl when they were at Sunset Vine Tower. And eventually, Steve Leva started working for Chuck. I knew him too, and we just kind of petered around the edge of getting in there. And finally, Chuck let me do some scenes on The Pumpkin That Learned to Smile, which was a Raggedy Ann special he was doing on his own. So I did some scenes of that, with a cat that flies through the air with its claws extended, gets stuck on a pumpkin, is rolling down.
Yeah.
And that was the funniest thing. Like, talk about responsibilities animators have. The scene chattered against the background on the Moviola because it wasn't on ones.
Yeah.
It was on twos. And a scene like that has to be on one so the mechanics don't fight each other, okay? So I said, this scene's terrible. It chatters. Why don't you let me fix it? And said, well, we're not going to pay you for it. I said, I want to do it. I want to do it. So I just went and did it on my own hook. I fixed all the in-betweens, put them in. It worked perfectly. But the funny part is that then later on I worked on Freezed Frame, which was part of Bugs Bunny Looney Christmas Tales in '77. We did a coyote bit for that.
Yeah.
Mary Roscoe was chief of production for Chuck. Well, Chuck wouldn't even come out of his office to Sweatbox. He let Mary do it. He gave me a scene of the Roadrunner running across the path, and I think it was like 6 feet or something, way too slow.
Yeah.
I thought he wanted the Roadrunner to run across for the entire 6 feet, so I showed his legs. And Mary calls me after several weeks go by and says, this scene, we can't use it. Come in and look at it. So I did. He says, we never ever show the Roadrunner's legs. It's always an egg beater blur. We never. I said, yeah, but there's 6 feet here. He can't run that slowly. You know, he's got to go through fast. See, I didn't realize I could have had the freedom to change the timing myself, and I could have fixed it up. I just thought I gotta follow. Chuck was God to me. He's the director. I gotta follow everything he does. Well, she says, we're not going to use you anymore because of this. She fired me. Because I showed the Roadrunner's legs. That was a cardinal sin. I didn't realize I'd done such a horrible thing, but that was the last thing I ever got from him. Mary was an amazing person. She did this picture called Ted E. Bear and the Great Bear Scare. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. I think this was by the early 80s. She delivered CBS a pose reel.
Yeah.
And evidently she kept the production budget of that for herself. And then disappeared, gave him a poster, and left.
Sent a card from Rio, and that was
and
the last
we never saw her again. So that was a pretty incredible thing.
With the money?
Well, this was the rumor. Whether it's a gospel truth or not, I cannot say. But this is the animation legends, which I love. Like Tom Cito says, print the legend, you know. So maybe she didn't really do that, but this was the stories that I heard.
Wow.
But anyway, that was when I was working for Chuck. I also had the privilege of directing Mel Blanc at that point. working for Joe Adamson, he was doing a little independent film called A Political Cartoon. This was 1972. Mel had had another one of his bone-cracking accidents. After that horrible accident he had in the 60s, his bones were very fragile. He could just step on a brake on the car, just a normal thing, and break his foot. So he was in the hospital with his foot up in traction, and we needed him to record Bugs Bunny lines. Well, I showed up there. His son...
So you did it in the hospital?
He recorded it right there in the hospital. His son, Noel, had the microphone right over his hospital bed and the Nagra tape recorder in the next room, and we did it all right there. And he made himself $400. He made more doing, 2 minutes work than I did directing, animating, doing the backgrounds, the whole thing. I think I got $300 for doing all that work. He got $400 for doing the voice. But it was a lot of fun working with him. He was spot on, professional, just terrific.
From the hospital bed.
From the hospital bed. It was called A Political Cartoon. It was a little independent film. We had a couple little tiny scenes with Bugs Bunny in it. So that was an interesting experience, getting to work with him. What a consummate professional. All trussed up like that, he was still working. That's the great thing about voice. He flat on his back, he could still do all the recordings he could handle. He probably paid for his whole hospital bill and then some, just sitting up in bed. Yeah. Anyway.
So traipsing on through the 70s.
Right, I'm trying not to spend too much time. I worked for a lot of different people, like my friend Marv Newland. I did the Toledo Mung Beast in his film Sing Beast Sing. It was 1980. I did a thing for a feature called Flicks, Loose Joints. We did a sequence called Cat and Mouse at the Home, which was like Tom and Jerry in the old folks' home.
Yeah.
And they were so decrepit, they were chasing each other on wheelchairs and stuff like that. That was a lot of fun to do. Did that freelance. Worked on Twilight Zone, the movie, when I was working on staff for Sam Cornell and Gary Katona. They had an outfit called Pacific Motion Pictures. That was in 1981. And I did this thing that Sally Cruikshank designed.
Yeah.
And I was always thinking, why couldn't Sally have animated this herself? It's really her stuff. But for some reason, I got to animate it. I don't think she was too happy with what I did, because I kind of put a lot of squash and stretch in it that she ordinarily wouldn't have done. But it was fun to do it anyway, and I got to meet Joe Dante, who I worked with again many years later. But that was Flicks, Twilight Zone the movie, which was 83. Then I worked for my friend Daryl Van Sitters on Sport Goofy in Soccer Mania. That was 1984.
Yeah, that started out in studio, and I think it then peeled off and was done out of studio.
He had his own place.
And Tad Stones, I think, developed Sport Goofy.
Right.
I can remember that Katzenberg and Eisner came and said, "Oh, this is fabulous, this is just great," and then they canceled it. And Ron Clements came up to me and said, I'm beginning to catch on about this Hollywood stuff. These guys say they love it, it's fabulous, it's great. That means maybe there's a small chance that they'll make it.
Right.
And anything less than that, they'll probably never make it. So, the hyperbole that went on with the new guys at Disney's when Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg came in was pretty astounding, especially to all of us naive animation people who had been there under the sleep eater regime of Ron Miller.
Right.
So
that was right about that time. And Daryl had an outfit called Special Projects.
Right, and they sort of offloaded it onto that.
Right.
And
we actually animated the show. We finished a cut of it, but it's not the cut they used. I think they hired Matt O'Callahan, and he did his take on it and revised a lot of it. And that's the version that eventually was released.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting thing to do. I hadn't done a whole lot of pro stuff on Disney characters. I got to do Goofy in his soccer outfit kicking a soccer ball, got to animate Uncle Scrooge and the kids.
Yeah.
Had a lot of fun working on that show. And I think I did that all freelance as well. I was not on staff on that. And then I did, all through that time, I did Tony the Tiger and Charlie Tunas. I worked for Bob Kurtz on the Chevron dinosaur commercials. You may remember those. Those were a landmark in what they paid. They paid $100 a foot. That was a big thing in the 70s, because most stuff paid much less than that, $40, $50. And Bob Kurtz doubled it, because he got such a nice big budget.
Your working life in the 70s into the early 80s was basically freelancing.
Right.
So describe that life of freelancing. Were you doing One project, two projects, three projects at a time?
Yeah, so a lot of times I'd be caught between Duck Soup or Bob Kurtz or, or whoever I'd be picking up, Sam Cornell, or whoever I'd be picking up from. Occasionally I'd find myself with three different things to do. So I would have to block out time. I would get up at 6 o'clock and work from 6 until 10 on one project, then 10 until 3, then 3 until whenever I got too tired to
So
see.
you passed out.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
It was for several years. I would work every night, every weekend. The
So you were
whole
working
years
7
go
day
by.
weeks.
Yeah, whole years would go by, and I thought, gee, what have I done anyway? I've been at this, I've been at this drawing board this whole time.
You've been at the light board forever.
But don't get me wrong. I lived it, loved it. I really did. I was in love with animation in those days.
But it was either a feast of riches or sometimes you were scrambling for work, wasn't it? One or the other.
Right, but I was lucky in that I did get a good continuity of work in those days.
Yeah.
And then, anyway, we're skipping over to 1987, and Richard Williams, who I used to write to when I was a kid, we had a little bit of correspondence, hired me. Well, actually, I shouldn't. Wait a minute. Let me see here something. Yeah, I guess that's correct. I guess that's the correct time sequence. He hired me to storyboard on Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Wow.
And-
so did you go to London?
Nope, didn't have to. We did. Joe Ramft and I worked on that, and we worked in the back of Amblin Entertainment on the Universal lot in the trailers, and that was a lot of fun. That was a fun show. That was one of my best experiences storyboarding, because we could use all the old characters, and we could bring Casper in, Baby Huey, Popeye.
And how did you find
name
Joe
it.
to work with?
He was great. And I admired Joe tremendously because of his cool. He never got upset. No matter how many changes flew at him, no matter how many revisions had to happen, he would just do them. And nothing bothered him. If I did something more than 3 or 4 times, I would start to get a little riled,
A little edgy.
A little upset. But Joe, I admired him.
Yeah.
And he kept me in line. He kept me from getting upset, which was fantastic.
So you were in a room together?
Yep. And we not only boarded, we tried to augment the screenplay. The screenwriters hated us because we would come up sometimes with lines. Like I came up with the booby trap line. Nice booby trap, isn't it? Or something like that. And they hated that because Bob Zemeckis loved it. And he saw it on the boards.
It ended up in the movie.
Yeah, he
right?
said, put it in the script. Put it in the script. And they did not like that. Said, that is not your place. We are the screenwriters, not you. There was a lot of territorial stuff going on. Every day we'd get new colored pages on the script. Blue
And so
pages,
what was,
yellow pages, red pages.
What was Joe Ramft's reaction to all this? He just sort
Didn't
of
seem to
let
care
it
much.
Slide over it.
He had his own imaginative world he existed in. He had children's books he was doing. He had all kinds of things he was involved in. His whole life wasn't as wrapped up in Roger Rabbit as it was mine, And,
Yeah, and he was on loan from Disney anyway, wasn't
yeah, he was.
Because
He had already worked at Disney for quite a while up to that point.
And how did you get onto the show? Because
I think
you were not on loan out from Disney.
No, I was on loan out from nobody. I was hired from being a freelancer. And Dick Williams knew that I was interested in old cartoons.
Oh, so
and
your
loved to draw
connection
them.
was through Dick.
So Dick saw that I got hired on that. But Zemeckis was a kick to work for. He was so much fun. Chuck Jones and another guy boarded the Daffy Donald piano duet sequence.
Yeah.
Their boards were kind of lazy. Not a whole lot was going on, not much activity.
So you and Joe.
Zemeckis
reboarded
was
them.
upset. Yeah, because the energy wasn't there. And he said, I hate to let Chuck go, but there's nothing I could do, So he put Joe and I on it, and we put a lot of energy in it. And we worked really hard on it.
One of the great sequences in that movie.
A lot of crazy stuff, and I forget I can't remember the animator's name now. He used to throw a lot of parties. Wonderful animator. He did a lot of the craziest stuff with Daffy Duck. Maybe you know him. Cito used to go to a lot of his parties. His name won't come to me now. Anyway, he's a great animator. So that was a lot of fun to work on.
Had his own studio.
Yeah, he did. But he always had his parties at the back of his house.
Yeah.
You remember who I mean. I just can't think of his name right now.
Yeah, he worked for Bluth for quite a while.
And he worked in England, too, for Dick on the Roger Rabbit show. He went over there and worked for him. And he told me a couple times, Dick Williams doesn't bother me. I could pick the guy up and throw him out the window. He doesn't bother me one bit. Because some of us were a little intimidated by him, but not him. He had no fear of Dick at all. So Anyway,
So how long were you boarding on that? About 6 months?
that
8
was
months?
maybe about 6 or 7 months. And then about that same time, I worked on the Family Dog episode of Amazing Stories. I did that for Brad Bird. That was in 1988. Went downtown Los Angeles to pick up on that. And I did a long sequence where the dog is trying to get the lady to feed him, like making his bowl clatter on the ground and all that.
Yeah.
That was my scene. And that was a lot of fun to work on.
It was on Spielberg's Amazing Stories.
That's right. Brad was an amazing bundle of energy in that. We actually feared for his life a couple of times because he would get so apoplectic, you know. He would get so upset. He says, they're screwing me. He says, Spielberg's screwing me. And this guy's after me. And he says, they won't let me do what I want to.
I have exciting news.
Yeah?
I knew him about 8 or 9 years previous to that, and he used to be famous at Disney's for running. He was a kid, running up and down the hallways in A, or maybe it was C, but it was on the first floor, screaming, "This place is screwed! This place is screwed!" Ed Hansen fired him, and fired him not once, but twice.
Oh, God.
So, yeah, he had anger management issues at that point, but he's a passionate guy.
He is passionate.
You know, and he's talented.
But he actually rolled on the floor a couple times, howling with rage when he was working on Amazing.
That sounds like the kind of stuff that went on at Disney's.
Well, we were afraid that he'd have a heart attack or something. He turned completely scarlet and we said, please calm down. We were terrified something would happen to him.
Oh, my God.
But look at all he's done since then. It didn't seem to bother him at
Yeah,
all.
well, the talent saw him through.
It did.
I think that's what did it.
But it was fun working with him.
We're going to take a quick break, and we will now go on to part 2, which will show up tomorrow here on El Blago.
See you then.
Here's the second half of the Mark Kausler interview. We are with part 2.
Part 2.
And, okay, so Mark, you ended up, your freelance, your principal freelance days, although you did it all the way through your long career, you sort of shifted at this point after your stint with Joe Ranft, and now you find your way to Disney's after Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yeah,
So,
well, that's just the storyboard part of it. But I had that scene I had done for Brad on Amazing Stories to show as a sample reel.
when you go over to Disney.
And I finally was successful at getting a job there after all the times I had applied. This was, I think, the 8th time I tried.
That you tried to get into Disney features.
Yeah, and I finally did manage to get in.
So what year are we talking about?
And this is
87?
after '88. You know, right around the late part of '88. This is when they were doing Oliver and Company.
Right,
And George Scribner was directing.
right.
And I found myself in Glenn Keane's unit. I don't know how I landed there, but that's where I wound up.
So you end up in Glenn Keane's unit,
And-
and what are you working on?
Glenn was doing a sequence with Fagin and his Doberman dogs, the real threatening dogs, you know.
Sure.
Very realistically done dogs with wonderful worked out anatomy on their ankles and feet, and very wiry dog. Interesting to draw. Difficult, but interesting to do. I got stuck on one little scene in this sequence of Fagin getting hit by a lamp which was hanging from the office roof. And it kept hitting he was talking to Bill Sykes, who was the big villain in the picture, which Glenn also animated and designed. And I got stuck on a scene. It was a close-up where the light would keep hitting Fagin's head and would vibrate, and Fagin would fall down. No matter how many times I did that scene, it just didn't seem to work. Glenn didn't like it. So what happened was I found myself out of it, like one day, and I had been...
You were called down to Ed Hansen's office.
You see, you remember the story better than I do. I had been called into Ed Hansen, and Ed said, well, you know, Glenn just doesn't think things are working out, you know, and we're going to have to reassign you. At least they didn't fire me. Thank God for that. They reassigned me to Hendel Butoy, and I got along much better with Hendel. Worked on some other characters I worked on the big fat butler character and things like that with him.
Yeah.
Oliver, I didn't think was a very successful picture, and I don't remember it so well.
Well, it made quite a bit of money for its time.
Yeah, but I remember working on it. And who was it? The voice of Oliver was a rock and roll star at the time.
It was Billy Joel.
See, you remember so much.
Well, it wasn't Oliver. He was
But who did the? Oh, Oliver was the kitty cat. But
Right.
the dog, the Dodger.
The Artful Dodger.
Yeah, it was all based on Oliver Twist, basically.
Right, the Charles Dickens novel.
But I worked so hard with Glenn. I tried so hard to please him. We had a long shot, which actually stayed in the picture. My only scene for Glenn, and it's still in the picture. It was a 3/4 down shot. George loved 3/4 down shots. The hardest angle there is to animate. He loved them. He liked to look like he was looking down at a football stadium. He really got a big kick out of that kind of staging. But it's murder to animate.
It's dynamic.
But I was animating these realistic dogs, walking slowly around Fagin with all this indirect lighting. It took me forever to do it. And Glenn helped me so much with it. He helped me draw the dogs and lectured me about anatomy. It was a terrific experience. But at the end of the day, it just wasn't enough for him. A lot of it was my fault because I didn't have the kind of experience he needed. And I didn't know the power.
You didn't know the Disney pecking order, and you didn't know the power of animators.
The power of a Disney animator is that if something isn't working, it's the Disney animator's responsibility to change it so that it will, even if you have to reboard it and relay it out to make it work. Right. I didn't know I could do that at that point. I was so green.
You were stuck with the layout.
I was trying to do what they gave me to do. I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
So with Hendel, it was a little bit more relaxed. Hendel went with the layouts more. He didn't encourage reboarding, but he loved thumbnailing. Hendel was a master of thumbnailing.
Used to reboard sequences. He'd get sequences. He used to fight, especially on Fox and the Hound when I was around. He and one of the directors were tussling over, and Glenn really plussed it. I mean, Glenn basically made it much more dynamic. It was the bear fight at the end of the Fox and the Hound, and he really
terrific
made it
stuff.
work.
Yeah, he sure did.
And that was mainly Glenn.
Yeah, it was a wonderful sequence.
He expected, I think, his crew to attack it and redo it, and you coming in without that background of knowing that, I can see where Glenn would say, well, you should, what's the problem here?
Right. But it was an interesting experience. He gave me a long analysis of myself and my not only my animation, but my points to improve in my personality and everything. I mean, he was not only a directing animator, he was a psychoanalyst.
What did he tell you exactly?
Well, I don't know if I want to talk about all that stuff. But,
okay.
But I still have that piece of paper to this very day.
Oh,
his analysis
your
of me.
review.
Yeah. The dreaded
reviews.
Reviews. I've got a story about that too. But anyway, after working with Hendel for a while, I got an offer to work for Dale Baer's unit. The animation was coming back from Roger Rabbit from overseas. Dick was slow. Everybody expected that to happen.
And there was 10 minutes.
There's 10 minutes. You know the whole story, see? So Dale took it over.
Dale set up his own little company and kept that running for 10 years before he went back to Disney.
Right. And this was in the same industrial park Dale had his unit in that Oliver and everything else was being done in. So all I had to do was basically walk 2 blocks over, and I was in Dale's unit. So I stayed with that until the end of the picture. And I animated the Droopy sequence, the Tweety sequence. I did a sequence where Benny the cab goes through dip and his wheels get soft. I animated the sequence where Benny gets in a real car and drives it
now, how
with his
long
wheels.
After you and Joe Rampt had been boarding the same movie?
This was more than a year and a half.
Year and a half later.
Yeah.
You're now animating.
I never thought I'd wind up animating.
You're probably the one guy on that show that did extensive boarding and extensive animating on the same picture and did it a year and a half, 2 years apart.
Yep. Because I had given it up basically for dead. You know, I thought, well, I'll never see this again. And then, son of a gun, we had all this stuff to do. And Zemeckis was so scared. Towards the end of it, he says, he came to us, again, talking about free overtime. He would appeal to, he was crying. He appealed to us, says, guys, you got to help me out. He says, this is a tough nut to crack. He says, I'm way over schedule, over budget. Anything you can do to help me, I would be forever grateful. So a lot of us, like me, would take stuff home, and we did it for free. We did it every way we could, and we got the thing done.
It's the animation curse.
I saw Zemeckis afterwards on the Amblin lot. I forget what I was doing there. I talked to him for a while, and I said, how's it going? Because he was in post-production.
This is still on Roger?
It's still on Roger, and he said, tunes are too hard. He says, I'm never going to do this again. And he was true to his word. Now he's involved in performance stuff and all that.
Capture, mocap.
We won't call that animation. At least I don't call it animation. It's a whole different genre unto itself.
It's digital rotoscope.
Right, basically. He's even going to do Yellow Submarine with that. That's going to be interesting to see. But anyway, I'm getting very far afield. So after that, I went back and did some work on Beauty and the Beast. I wound up working with Ruben Aquino on that. We shared a room, and I was working on Maurice, who was Belle's dad. He was sort of like a fat Geppetto, but Ruben had this impression that he was supposed to be a real wacky kind of an inventor character, very eccentric character.
Right.
But he came off kind of, I think Maurice Evans did his voice. He kind of came off very fatherly and warm and kind of conservative. And I animated this scene after a big explosion comes off in his lab.
Right.
He's stuck in a barrel, okay? And I did one version of it that was very dignified, and the barrel just sort of slowly rolls over, and he gets up to his feet, and he looks very old, and he's talking. And Katzenberg saw it, and he said, "Nah," he said, "you ought to be swinging by his heels from the rafters. This is a funny, wacky guy. What are you doing?" So I had to reanimate that whole scene with him stuck in the barrel. He hops up and down. The whole thing busts into a million pieces. He leaps to his feet. He's got a lot of energy. And that's the one that Katzenberg bought. But I don't think Ruben was too happy with that. That was not his vision of the character.
But the chief overruled his vision.
Right. But I think on just about all the other scenes, Ruben got his way because they weren't watching him as closely. I did get to do one scene that I loved of Maurice, which was where he goes into the bar and he's trying to get everybody revved up about the Beast. You know, and he's shaking people by the lapels and running from one character to another, desperately appealing to them. And I got a lot of fun out of that because running stuff is fun to do, and it isn't as critical. It's a lot easier to have a character run fast than do a slow walk. Anybody will tell you that.
Not heavy-duty acting.
Right. Well, it was acting, but it was acting at high speed. Yeah, with a lot of action in it. So I had a lot of fun with that scene. That was a memorable experience on Beauty and the Beast. But we did some stuff that was almost right off the rotoscope, too. We had some live reference for Belle and things like that we had to follow. We went back and forth. The funny part is that nobody thought that picture was going to be this great holy classic when we were working on it. We usually just made fun of it.
What was the view of it at the time of the staff?
We just thought it's just a pot boiler, you know, it's got some good music in it, but you know, who cares? It's not going to be anything that remarkable. And I think Glenn was probably more enthusiastic about it than anybody. But Glenn had an interesting attitude too, is that one day, I guess the monotony got to him or something. He went crazy. And he had this catapult with a rubber slingshot on it, a great big one. Set it up on one side of the room. This is when we were in those industrial buildings, you know, in Flower Street. Yeah, Glenn did this. We were so surprised it was him. He put food in it, like just stuff he got from the cafeteria, milk cartons and mashed potatoes, and he launched them across the room and splattered them against the wall on the other side. It was so funny. Like, I think he was inspired by Sean Keller, who... Sean was
always wacky.
Crazy man who liked to have these racing cars. He had this fad for racing cars. He got Glenn and Ruben and all the direct animators, and George Scribner and everybody, lying on their backs on the floor one day. He built a ramp over their tummies and used it to race his cars over them. And they all submitted to it. That was the funny part about Sean. Everybody else probably would have gotten fired.
Well, you know,
but
Sean...
everybody loved him.
When I was there, Sean did something that started to tick off Michael Eisner. Eisner was doing a 60-minute interview with, and I can't, you know, I'm drawing a blank on her name, the blonde that's now on ABC.
Yeah.
And
yeah, right.
Is married to the director.
See, we'll go back and edit this
Mike
later.
Nichols.
We'll find all the names.
Anyway.
Not Elaine May.
She was in Talking. She was in, it wasn't Elaine May.
Yeah, I know. I know who you mean, though.
I'll think of her
Diane
name.
Sawyer?
Diane Sawyer.
Yeah, okay.
Diane Sawyer and Michael Eisner
Okay.
are in a room at the Flower Street studio.
Mm-hmm.
And Sean Keller bursts in the middle of the interview in a gorilla suit with a Stetson, and Michael Eisner is like livid. And then he looks over at Diane Sawyer, who's laughing uproariously, bent over with laughter, and he realizes that the camera's going and that it's probably not a good idea to come off like this, angry executive. So he ended up laughing too. And I think it ended up making it into the show, into the 60 Minutes.
A classic.
And, but Eisner quickly realized that he couldn't show the anger that he was feeling because Diane Sawyer thought this was so hysterical that this wacky animation person had burst in a gorilla suit. But that was Sean.
Wasn't
Sean
Peter
did
there
that
too?
kind of stuff.
I remember Peter Schneider being there at that same interview.
I don't know if he was in that interview. He might have been in the interview, and they all kind of did a double take, and they all kind of realized that Diane's laughing, we'd better laugh too.
Because the way we heard it, Peter covered up and made Michael feel better because he said, "Oh, that's just Sean. He always is cutting up like that. Don't pay any attention to him."
Yeah.
So Peter just tried to save face, and he did it. He managed to smooth things over.
Make the boss look good. That's
but Sean was a handful. But what a character! He was fun to hang around.
So when you get to the end of Beauty and the Beast, then what happens with your career?
Then what happened? Sounds like that Daffy Duck cartoon. Anyway,
Did you stick around at Disney?
I did a lot of stuff in and out for Disney. I worked for Jerry Reese. We did a picture called Back to Neverland. Now we did that. That was for Florida Disney.
That was Bob Abel. You were working, weren't you working off campus for that?
Yeah, we were working at the little studio. I don't remember that it was Abel's, but I'm
that.
sure you're right. I just can't remember.
Bruce Smith was on that.
Yeah.
Mark Kirkland was the.
I got to do a lot of the Peter Pan characters. I even did a little shot of Peter Pan himself, which was a lot of fun to do. I remember Bruce was envious of me because he wanted to do that scene of Peter, and somehow I got with it. But it was okay. He did some really good stuff on that show too.
And he got to be on camera with Walter.
Right, with Walter Cronkite. Yeah, I went down to the soundstage at Raleigh Studios where they were shooting that, and Robin Williams was there, and Walter Cronkite too, and that was kind of fun. I think that's the first time I've ever met Don Ernst. I think he was the producer on that too. Don got involved with the Roger Rabbit shorts, which I went on to do. I worked on all three of those. And one of those was done in Glendale.
You worked on it here.
That was Tummy Trouble. Then we did Roller Coaster Rabbit as the first project of the Florida studio. Went down there to do that.
So you moved to Florida. Now you're on staff during all this stuff, right?
Yeah. And that was an interesting show, that Roller Coaster Rabbit, because the first director, I don't think I'll say his name today, was relieved of duty on Roller Coaster Rabbit for various nefarious activities which he was involved in. And he was replaced with Rob Minkoff. When Rob came in, the new broom swept completely clean, and we had to start the whole thing all over again.
Rob wanted to start from square one.
I think that was an $8 million short. I think that's what it wound up costing.
It's a funny short.
Yep. But Spielberg had to approve everything in it, and Disney had to approve everything in it. Wow, what a shooting match. So
how long were you animating on that? I mean, you probably animated on both versions, didn't you?
Yep. We contracted for about 6 months down there. I think I was down there 9 months. That was an interesting experience, though. Florida was an interesting state to be in. And Kathy and I got to do a lot of little side trips, went down to the Keys, and we drove all over the place and got to see the state quite a bit. I even got to see where my grandparents used to live.
Wow.
It was fun. Anyway, then the third one, I wound up, Pat Ventura, my old friend, did most of the boarding on Trail Mix. I think it was called Trail Mix. Right?
Yeah.
Something like that. Trail Mix-Up. Then I didn't think I would have anything further to do with the character, and they wanted me to animate on it, even though that was being done in Florida too. I had moved back here by then. So they just gave me a few scenes to do.
So they shipped them out from Florida and you did them
right.
in Glendale.
I was so happy because I got to do a close-up of Jessica. And she's so much fun to draw for two big reasons. They used to say back in the crude days.
For two big reasons.
And
did you animate her in the feature at all, or were you?
No, never got to touch her in the feature. That was all a British thing. No, I forget the guy's name.
I don't think Dale had any of her footage.
No, I forget the guy's name that did her. He did a wonderful job with her. He's a British animator, wonderful guy. I can't remember his name, very talented. But anyway, Mark Henn was supposed to have all the Jessica scenes, and I got this close-up away from him. He didn't like that. He made that pretty obvious that he didn't care for that. And I had to redraw her several times and do all these things, but it was fun to do. It was
that was the last one. That was Trail Mix-Up.
Tiny little scene, big deal. It's like 5 feet or something. Who cares? but it was fun to do. And that was my last excursion with Roger. But you know the story of Roger. I mean, they had 12 other shorts in various stages of production that never got made.
Those are the only 3? I think it was just those 3, right?
Those 3 made it, but they had 12 other ones. I boarded on the waiter one, where he's in a restaurant, the French waiter thing. We thought that was going to be a piece of cake. It went through crew after crew after crew.
Now
revised.
why?
And I don't know why. It got stuck. It was revised and revised and revised. Finally, it just died. It just died of old age.
Probably couldn't get Spielberg's approval.
I don't know what it was, but like I say, those were a minefield of approval. And they always wanted the same story, as I'm sure you know.
Oh, sure, they want
which is the baby in peril and all that.
The baby in peril and Roger going,
ah! Yeah, yeah. And every attempt to do anything more creative was almost always shot down. And there were some funny ones. They had some funny ideas.
They're still in archives there somewhere, probably, right?
Who knows what's going to happen? Maybe they'll make them on 3D Maya someday. Who knows? But anyway, that was the end of that. But there was a fun era of my life, was working on that stuff. Anyway,
and you're still
skipping over a ton of stuff.
At Disney. Now you're freelancing off and on all the time. You're
yeah. One of my principal freelance jobs was working on Ren and Stimpy for John Kricfalusi. I animated on Stimpy's Invention, which was the Happy Happy Joy Joy song. I had a lot of fun working on that. But John was an amazing director. I was working for the princely sum of $35 a foot, the approved foot. That was a big mistake on my part, because John was very hard to get anything out of. And he made me revise those scenes 4 and 5 times.
So you're making about 50 cents an hour.
But they were fun to do. And one of the most extreme, he had me do Stimpy shaking his butt, which he just loved. And I had this great big thing where the butt cheeks were going out like ocean waves. And he said, well, that's too wild. I can't use that. Well, I took the drawings home and kept them. Something told me these might come in handy. Sure enough, a month and a half later, he calls me and says, you remember those drawings where they're like ocean waves? I want to use them. So I was glad that I kept them. So they wound up being in the picture. But that was the only time when we got to animate an episode of that show in-house. Everything else went to Korea. But anyway, that was a little freelance work I did there.
Yeah.
Then I got involved for a whole year, from 90 to 91, storyboarding the first version of Pomp and Circumstance for Fantasia, what became Fantasia 2000, but was originally called Fantasia Continued.
George Scribner was on that.
George was involved in that. And that was, again, an all-star thing. It was kind of like the original Roger Rabbit feature, but with all the Disney characters all involved in the same story.
Yeah, yeah.
And they got involved in this Disney legacy thing. Roy Disney's wife, Roy E. Disney, loved the idea of having little crowns and baby princes and princesses, like the next generation of Disney royalty coming up. So we had to work that into the show. We had all this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
We had the whole, I don't know how, we worked a whole year on that sequence. We had these elaborate boards. All this stuff was done up. Well, finally it was done. And the story that I heard, I don't know if it's true or not, was Glenn Keane and Andreas and a bunch of the key animators came to Michael Eisner, I guess, and said, you're not going to make this. You know that. You're not going to do it. It's no good. Nobody likes it, and we're not going to do it. So even though Roy Disney's wife was in love with the sequence, that version of it got deep sixed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I remember, Kimball told me a story about all the old timers. They wanted them to each do a piece of animation on that George version. And Ward didn't like it. Mark Davis didn't like it. I think they thought it was too hokey. And so they had a big meeting. And the studio called me because they wanted us to grant waivers so all the old timers could animate without rejoining the union, which was fine with me because it's 5 feet, 10 feet. It was basically
little
sort
scenes.
of a little scenes. It was sort of a gimmick,
Right.
but they ended up not doing it. And then of course the whole sequence got completely reconfigured
As the Donald Duck.
and it ended up being Donald Duck,
Which
on
I
the
wound
Ark.
up animating later. But the interesting thing about
Just like Roger Rabbit, you board on one thing and then...
who knows how it's going to wind up. But like the whole story premise of the original version was the Magical Maestro, the Tex Avery cartoon where a magician's wand gets mixed up with a baton
Right.
from the conductor, and all this magical stuff starts happening.
Right.
But unfortunately, it wasn't anywhere near as funny
Yeah.
as what Tex tried to do. You know?
Well, it's tough.
Didn't have the gags.
It's tough.
We had to work in that serious
Didn't Hendel
stuff.
end up directing that finally? Wasn't that? Who was it that directed that
Yes,
sequence?
Hendel did direct no,
so-
wait a minute. Francis Clevis.
Francis Clevis.
He did the Donald. Hendel did the little tin soldier,
Oh, okay.
which I animated
know
on
that
too, but that was mostly CG. Hendel loved computer stuff and CG.
So were
He
you
was-
animating CG?
Nope.
Or were you-
I did some of the few traditional scenes in it. It was a combination of traditional and CG. The CG was done for the toys. We did fishermen, we did fish, jumping in fish nets, all this stuff. That was all done traditionally and all kind of mixed
So
together.
you boarded a lot of Fantasia, and then you animated quite a bit of Fantasia.
Yeah, but nothing I boarded on Fantasia got made. Somebody else boarded the Donald
but
Duck
a
thing.
lot of your animation got used.
Right, fortunately, yeah. I
So
was
what
lucky there.
what sequences did you ended up animating on? You ended up
In
on
the Donald
Hendel-
picture?
Yeah.
Well, I did the string of animals. Basically, we had a bungee cord of animals. We had snakes and alligators and all kinds of things. Donald was at the end of the bungee cord, and his rear end's being snapped out by crabs that are in the sand, and they kind of form a pyramid and try to pinch him. That's pretty gruesome. The key scene, though, was missing from that sequence. I kept begging for it. Please give me a long shot. One long shot of the side of the ark showing how this animal chain works, because it was all done in close-ups
You
and
gotta set
mediums.
it up.
I
They
said,
never
"Just
did it?"
one long shot. They wouldn't give it to me. I
Did
practically begged them
Did
for it.
anybody do it?
Nope.
Or was it's not in the picture?
Nope, the whole picture went
Okay.
through. I guess it was clear enough to the director that it was okay, but I just thought this needs an establishing shot, even if it's in the middle of the sequence.
Yeah.
Couldn't
well, I know
do it.
that Cito was doing that sequence originally,
Yeah, he was.
and then he decamped over to DreamWorks Animation.
Right.
So, okay.
I was like, they hired me to work on it, and they had nothing ready to do. So I gave myself assignments for many months while we were waiting for the first scene to come up. And I just animated Donald, doing all kinds of different things, interacting with camels and dragons.
Did that get
and-
into the picture?
No, but I had a ton of stuff I'd done, just scene after scene, and Hendel loved it. He said, he wouldn't tell me he really liked my animation, but he says, you know, one thing I admire about you is your industry. He loved that. He loved the fact that I was trying really hard to learn how to draw the character well and to animate him well. And it was fun to work at from that standpoint. I don't think it's a great picture, but it was fun to work on.
Now, had you been at Disney straight through during all this period, because you went to Florida, so you were assigned down
Right,
to Florida?
and I was still on staff. Even when I came back, the first thing I worked on was that boarding of Pomp and Circumstance.
Right.
You know, which in those days was the Little Princess and Princesses thing. So I worked in and out of that. I'm trying to get me some kind of a sequence here. Okay, but after that, after Fantasia 2000, I wound up working at Warner Brothers, and we
So what caused you to leave Disney at that point?
just ran out of work, and I couldn't. There was nothing else to jump onto, because by that point they were shifting over from looking at people as part of a staff to looking at people on a picture-by-picture basis.
Right, everybody had to do baseball trading.
Yeah. Now, that's exactly what happened, Steve. At the end of the Donald sequence in Fantasia 2000, I said, okay, now we're going to do baseball trading. So I had to make up a sample tape, circulate it throughout the studio,
And they either pick you up or they don't.
no takers. So I packed my stuff up and walked out. That was it. Then I got a job on Incredible Mr. Limpet, which they were going to do as a combination of, in those days, I think it was going to be traditional, but that was right on the cusp of the Phil Tippett era of CG.
Right, it
Phil
was-
Tippett did some design on it.
Right, and that was right after their first movie, Quest for Camelot, wasn't it?
Yes,
Somewhere in there.
which I didn't work on at all. But
Right,
that was,
and
and
then-
Brad was working on Iron Giant simultaneously with our boarding of Mr. Limpet.
And you just missed Space Jam by that much.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, well, I later on worked more or less on the
Worked on the
sequel to that
sequel.
picture.
We'll get
But
to that.
Be that as it may. Anyway,
So you go working on Limpet.
we worked on that for months. Again, here's, like we were talking about why I don't like storyboarding. After a while, you work on so many pictures that don't make it or aren't going to be finished that storyboarding seems like writing in the sand. You're waiting for the next wave to come in and wipe out everything you've done.
Right, when
Nobody will
somebody
ever
doesn't
see
like
it.
or you don't make it past the third level of approval or whatever, and then boom, you're back to square one, right?
You're absolutely right. And this, again, was, I think they had the original picture in mind, the Don Knotts version, and we could never, this was going to be Jim Carrey doing Limpet. Well, Jim had a pay or play deal.
Now, were you on staff for all this?
I think I was getting
You
a
were
weekly.
over on Brand Boulevard.
Yeah, that's right. I was getting a weekly salary. Jim got, I don't know how many $1 million
To not make the movie.
to not be in it. What a deal. We
Pay
kept
or
saying,
play.
God, I wish I could get a deal like that.
He didn't play, so they paid.
Yeah, incredible. I mean, they even did reference stuff of his head, just his head, so we could imagine his head being involved with Limpet's fish-like body.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, stuff like that.
So how long were you working on that?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, it says here, what does it say?
Probably
It says
about 9 months.
98 to 99.
Yeah,
I
so
was
you were there
working on that.
6 to 10 months, something like that.
Then we segued over to Osmosis Jones, which also was a Warner Brothers project, and that was Tom and
So
Bill
you
Kroon.
stayed right on through, and you
We
swung
changed
off-
venues. We changed from downtown Glendale to beautiful
Sherman Oaks.
downtown Burbank. Van Nuys, actually it was more Van Nuys than Burbank. Van
Yeah,
Nuys
I
Boulevard.
think you were in Sherman Oaks, the Sherman Oaks Gallery.
You remember? Yeah. So, see, I'm starting to get hazy on a lot of these things.
Well, it's because I had to walk through all those places while you were doing it.
Right.
so
I think I saw
remember.
you over there too. Anyway, then we were working on Osmosis Jones. I was a story artist and then did some animation on that show.
So you worked first as a board artist.
Right.
And then?
that was, again, a picture that had a lot of problems in story. It wasn't Tom or Pete's fault necessarily. It's just that management couldn't make up their mind whether to be
It was Tom
serious.
Cito and Pete Kroon.
Who did I say?
Pete.
Yeah, Pete Kroon, yeah. Anyway, that was management couldn't make up their minds how the picture should go, whether it should be serious, comedic, whatever. Didn't they hire Bill Murray?
Bill Murray did the live action.
Who directed? Was that the Coen brothers?
It was not the Coens. It was the guys that did Dumb and Dumber.
Okay. But they
And
tried to
that
put a
director was
wacky,
him.
strange kind of spin on the live action, which didn't really come off. It felt flat somehow. I don't know
And
what
Tom
happened.
always said, and he said this in a previous Tag interview, he said he didn't think that the live action melded and merged very well with the animation, which he thought hurt the film.
And also the animation was produced on a more expensive, higher level. The art direction was very good in the picture, actually. It's quite handsome looking. And the live action looked real scruffy and kind of frayed around the edges, you know?
Yeah, it was just kind of Raggedy Andy because they just sort of tossed it off.
Yeah, they
And
did.
I think that was the problem with it. And I think they admitted to Tom later, or to somebody, maybe not Tom, that, yeah, we could have done a better job with that. It was between their main jobs, and they didn't care. I think it wasn't real high on their agenda, and I think that's the reason that the live action.
And they did manage to spin off a TV series from it, which was an interesting development.
Yeah, they did the Osmosis Jones TV series,
Right.
which lasted for a while.
That's where I met Mark Andrews, who later became a top story guy at Pixar. And he was another guy very much like Joe Ranft in that he was how could you pronounce it? Indefatigable.
Indefatigable.
Yeah, I can't pronounce that word. Mark never was ruffled. He was a tough guy. At one point, he likened the story crew unto the Ben-Hur sequence where the guy is, they're rowing the giant boats, and he's tapping out the rhythm on the on the drums. He says, "Okay, story crew, I'm going to tap out the rhythm."
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think that, the problem with Osmosis Jones was that in that period, Warner Brothers didn't know what to do with animation. They had just botched, the Iron Giant.
Yeah, they didn't handle it
And
too well.
they didn't handle Osmosis Jones very well. And the picture, didn't open very well, and that was that. And they didn't keep the division open very much longer. Because they had a whole separate, Warner Brothers feature animation division, which went on for about 5 years before they folded it closed it down.
Right.
And now when they do animation, it just comes out of their television shop, Warner Brothers Animation, not Warner Brothers Feature Animation.
Now, Osmosis Jones was a watershed to me too, in that it was the first time I was aware that there were actually animators living in the studio. This guy comes in, I won't mention his name, he was a lead. Comes in, he's got his cot, his hot plate, his coffee maker. He moved into his office and he stayed there night after night after night working on his stuff. So I suddenly became aware, wow, is this business ever morphing into something like permanent freelance conditions? I felt kind of bad because that's the way I lived for many years when I was freelance, but I said, this is different. This is a salaried position, and there are rules to govern these things.
No, you know? I know. And the thing I've found is union rep, you can't stop them. Because they'll either, if you try and stop it in the studio, everybody takes their work home.
Yeah.
Now, some shows are better than others. It doesn't happen on every production.
Right.
And I've stopped it cold on some productions. But I'm usually getting opposition from the people I represent. They usually, a lot of them don't want me, they complain, but they don't want me to do anything.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do things anyway. But anyway, we're getting precise.
Well, we're getting far afield, but that's another interesting thing I became aware of, which affected a production I worked on later on as well. So then I went back to freelance, 2001, 2002, and did a lot of stuff all over Duck Soup, and I even worked for a little on The Simpsons, one of the Simpsons episodes. That was an interesting experience, and that turned out to be not very much fun at all. I was so surprised.
Was that the first year or the second year?
Mark Kirkland I was working for. Well, there was some place in 2001, 2002, whatever
so
season that falls
into.
It
would be about the first or second season,
right.
Probably.
But they wanted a very straight handling of the characters. They look cartoony, but they're very serious in their approach to model. Everything is very, very rigid. I was quite surprised. They said,
"Oh, they still are that way."
Effectively, just draw a live-action guy or like an actual figure drawing, and then Simpsonize it. That's what they wanted to see. They didn't want to see a whole lot of squash and stretch and a lot of funny stuff. They wanted a very straight approach.
Yeah.
And they had an interesting way of paying on that show. It was sort of like a lottery.
Back when it was Klasky Chupo.
Yeah, well, actually, this was not. This was after Klasky Chupo.
Was it Film Roman?
This was Film Roman era.
Okay, so it was several years in.
I was doing layout. You would take boards, turn them into layouts. You were paid by your footage, okay? But when you were doing the layout, you had no idea what your footage was. It hadn't been determined.
Yeah.
So you just waited to see what you got paid.
Now, are you working in studio?
No, working at home.
Yeah.
You would turn it in, and you'd hope to the good animation lord above, please have those scenes run a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. So
I was lucky on those.
Financially?
I did okay. It wasn't great pay, but it wasn't horrible either. But the trouble is, about that time too, I started to lose my cool as to being slightly dishonest about telling people sometimes what they want to hear. At the end of my stint on that, they said, "Well, did you have a good time? Enjoy working on this?"
It was wonderful.
No, I told them the truth. I said, "Well, it just wasn't what I was expecting." I never got hired again.
Oh dear. Honesty is not always the best policy.
You're darn tootin'. But anyway, then let me see. After a whole bunch of freelance, then I started getting, this was 2002, 2003, I started getting involved in Looney Tunes Back in Action. And I can't even remember exactly. I think I got hired on that because of Joe Dante, who I've known many, many years. We're old friends.
Yeah.
And I started boarding on the lot, on that picture, on the old Warner Brothers lot, in the art department.
Well, and Cito was boarding on
that
too.
Yeah, he joined the storyboard set, and Eric Goldberg was the head of the whole shebang.
Now, had you known Eric at Disney? Probably you did.
Known him long time. Known him long before Disney. I knew him when he worked in New York. Again, we would correspond. I knew Nancy Beeman and all the New York contingent. We were all friends.
All animators know all other animators.
Well, especially a guy like Eric, and he's very, very talented, and very good person in his own right.
Yeah.
So, anyway, be that as it may, started on that picture, started boarding, and they kept coming to me because I had some knowledge of a lot of the supporting players in the old Looney Tunes shows, a lot of the old Chuck Jones cartoons, and How to Draw Pepe Le Pew, and all these different characters. So I would not only board them, but I did little temporary model sheets because
Yeah.
they had no model material on all of these characters. So I generated that as well.
Yeah.
And had a great time doing that. But especially being on the lot was a wonderful experience because, we could watch Tom Cruise shooting that Japanese picture he was in where he plays a samurai and doing all this great stuff. We watched him build a whole Japanese village there for him. And wow, I mean, it's just, what an experience. It was just a terrific, every day there's something interesting going on. Really good. So then they moved the animation of that
Off to Sherman Oaks.
to Sherman Oaks. So I moved on to Sherman Oaks with that. And I got a lot of crowd scenes to do. I got the scene of the dogs playing poker at the table. It's based on that crummy painting you see on tapestries
Yeah,
that
the
are
velvet
for sale
painting.
on gas station parking lots. I got to animate that scene with all the Warner Brothers dogs, Mark Antony and the little guy with the derby hat on, the little dog, and Charlie Dog, and they're all playing poker. And then something, I think one of the live action characters lands in the middle of the shot. And that was so different from working on Roger Rabbit, doing live action animation. On Roger Rabbit, none of those shots was tied down. We had to pick spots in the rotoscopes to relate to so we could animate our stuff.
Right,
We had
they
to be
didn't-
aware of how the camera moved.
They didn't take into account any of the animation.
But back in action, computers to the rescue. Because everything was stabilized in the computer. When we finished our animation, unsqueeze. And
They-
everything went back to a
And they would
random
just
pattern.
make it where they needed to make it.
Automatically registered. It took so much of the work away.
The magic
Made it
of
easier
digital.
to do. That was one case where digital really did help.
So you worked as a board artist for probably, what, 7, 8, 9 months?
Probably around there.
And then another year.
Then we
as-
segued up almost a year working
So
on
you
that.
got a year and a half,
Out of
year
that
and 9 months.
one
on
picture.
On that picture.
Yeah, it was a lucky thing. All this time, I'm trying to finish my first little independent short, which I started. It's called "It's the Cat." I
When did you
started that
start
scene when I was animating on Beauty and the Beast. When I was doing Maurice, I started the first scene of
So
that.
in the early 90s, you had started your own personal short.
Right. At the same time, Beauty and the Beast was going, and I kept doing it all the way through. On the side, whenever I had a few hours to spare, I would do that scene as a stopgap. So I would never have to bring in newspapers or play chess or whatever. I wanted to make this little picture. And like I was telling you at lunch, I gave up on it many times. Thought I'll never finish this. It wound up being 5,000 drawings, and I had to do them all myself because
So you
no
did
money
your
to
own,
assist
you were
them.
the lead, you were the in-betweener, you were
Layout,
the breakdown, and you were
everything.
the layout artist.
Background.
You were basically a one-man band.
Right. But then my friend Greg Ford in New York really liked the pencil test that I had shot of this thing. He took it under his wing to do it in color. And he hired wonderful people in New York, including some people that worked at Famous Studio on Casper, like this lady named Rose Eng, who was in her 70s when she was working on our picture. And she did a great job. Beautiful inking on the thing. I love
Yeah.
the cells from that film.
Yeah.
So that was a very positive, wonderful experience, done to an old record that the Harry Reeser Syncopators recorded in 1927 called The Cat. And I heard this record on the radio originally. Thought, there's a picture in that. I love that kind of dance band music from the 1920s. So I used that as the sole soundtrack. There's no added sound effects, nothing. All the sound effects, everything come from the music. So it's like Mary Ellen Butte did when she was doing her experimental films in the 30s. To see music, that's kind of how I'm doing my films, except I'm not doing abstracts, I'm doing cartoon images.
Mm-hmm.
And everything, the music comes to life, and the rhythm of the music influences the timing of the characters. All that works intimately with the soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to do another one like that now. I'm hoping against hope that will be done. It's kind of stuck in ink and paint now.
Now, The Cat,
New
the
York.
first one, that you've shown at a
Film
multitude
festivals.
of film festivals.
Right.
How many film festivals has it been
I
at?
think there were at least 5 or 6 that I got into. Some rejected it, and some accepted it. Like, it did play Annecy, it played Ottawa, it played Anima Mundi in Brazil.
What's the reaction been?
Reaction has been very good overall. We've won a couple of little awards with it. We
Have
even
you-
got into the second screening of the Academy. We didn't actually get nominated for anything, but at least I got past the first elimination. So enough people liked it that it got to that.
And how long, have you put this out anywhere? I mean, commercial, you haven't put it out anywhere commercially, right?
Well, It's streaming on the internet, but I don't want to tell anybody where because I'm not happy with the technical side of that. It looks terrible streaming. They didn't do a good job.
Oh my God.
So I don't tell anybody.
And you don't have
where
it on
is.
YouTube or anything like
No,
that?
no, I don't like that. But you can see the pencil test if you go to my website, which is www.itsthecat.com.
I will do it.
It's the cat. You can see the actual pencil test. And there are cells for sale. Here's a big commercial plug for you.
Well, right. Why
Cells
not?
for sale on that website. And there's
Yeah.
even a blog on that website. Anyway, so I hope
You're doing another one now, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to finish another one called There Must Be Some Other Cat, which is an obvious title for a sequel.
Sequel to the first one.
It's based on a record called There Must Be Somebody Else, done by a band named Fred Rich, who was also big late 20s, big band guy. And it's a terrific picture, wonderful tempo in it. And I've just done that on the collapsing edge of the old technology. Like, I read the soundtrack on a Moviola. The company that had that Moviola is now closed, completely gone.
Yeah, it's all digital.
And you can't even get a Moviola anymore.
No.
Everything gone.
Hard to get a horse and buggy either.
We have the last, you're right, we have the last regular animation stand in New York. I'm a partial owner of that stand. I had to be in order for us to still be able to shoot this thing on film.
Incredible.
So this will probably be it when this is done.
So
and I
you should put
hope
those
it will
two
be
shorts
done.
together when you get them done, and you should circulate them commercially.
That's the plan. That's the plan.
Because you'll have 2 3-minute things of beauty.
I hope so. I hope they will be beautiful. But anyway, the last commercial thing I did was working for Daryl's Renegade Studio on the Hi Hi Puffy Amiyumi show,
Yeah.
which, speaking of future technology, was all done in Flash. And that was a whole TV series that was major domo by Sam Register. And it was basically kind of like, if anybody remembers the Pink Lady and Jeff show, which was about a Japanese girl band, it was kind of the same thing. These are some girls that sang
And that
very
was
up-tempo
05,
stuff.
06, 04, 05, is it?
Oh, that was 04 and 05 when I
Yeah,
worked
yeah,
on
yeah.
this,
Yeah, yeah.
And
They did
we-
2 seasons of that or just one?
I think just the one. We worked on that. Again, that was I got to the point where I was directing Flash animators. I knew nothing whatever about Flash. Didn't know how it worked. I wound up animating on paper some things that I wanted to have done, and they just wound up incorporating it into the show.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing about that show was, again, the economics of how it worked, in that the staff practically lived there in order to get that show done. Their deadlines were so tight that they were sleeping in the
A
studio.
non-signature studio, I
Yeah.
would say.
Yeah. Well, I didn't sleep there, but
Well,
I
you
did
get to
take things
point in
home
your
a couple of
career
times.
Where you just figure, do I really need to work 14-hour days?
Well, the irony is that the industry still is predicated on that, and I guess it's always going to be.
It was that way in the 30s. My mentor, Larry Clemens, was an assistant in the shorts unit at Disney in 1936, 37, and he told me the story. He said, Friday afternoon, the production manager came through, this is at Hyperion, and says, "Who wants to work tomorrow?" And Larry said, this is the Depression. If you wanted to have a job, you raised your hands and went, "Oh, I do.
Yeah.
He said, so
Yeah.
you came in on Saturday and worked for free, and they gave you a boxed lunch. And that was the way it was. So,
Yeah.
the more things change, the more things seem to stay the same.
They do. But you get awfully tired of it.
Oh, I know.
I've had such a long time working like that I guess I'm ready for more normal hours, if
Well,
such a
and-
thing exists.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, and sometimes my father-in-law, Charlie Downs, he had a commercial that
Great
he
animator,
animated
too.
all by himself. He never got paid. $35,000 animating at home. They owed him 35
And they
grand.
stiffed him for $35,000?
35 grand he got stiffed for. And his winsome little daughter, now my wife, said, "Served you right for working off-clock non-union." And I don't think Charlie did that again after
No,
that.
That would cure you.
He got stiffed real good. So, and I hear these stories all the time. It will go on until human beings are just a part of history. Because it seems to be part of human nature. Some humans will exploit other humans. And I don't know
economics
how
has a hell of a lot to do with it too, the pressures that you're under. And we're going through another siege of bad economic times now. So I'm
Oh,
sure
sure.
the pressure must be
The Great
incredible
Recession.
on the new generation of kids that are very fluent in Maya and Flash and know how to work within that venue.
Oh, yeah.
It must be very, very difficult.
It's tough. It's a tough, it's always tough. This stuff was going on the minute I started this job 20 years ago. It was going on. And it had gone on the 10 years before that, and the 10 years before that, and I had heard stories from Larry about it going on in the 30s.
Yeah.
I know it was going on in the 20s. I've read stories from old timers about, live action shows where he said you came in and worked until you fell down. And that's the way it was. So yeah, exploitation is always kind of a constant, and sometimes it's worse and sometimes it's better, and it varies from show to show, but it's always there. So,
and a lot of it varies with the kind of people you're working with and how
yeah,
they feel about you.
There are some very good showrunners who are very forward-looking and don't exploit people.
Right.
And I find in studios that you'll have one show where everybody's happy and aren't worked to death. Show down the hall, that's not the case. Different person in charge and a whole different ethos, and it really is weird. And this is all within the same studio.
Yeah.
So it really does vary widely.
It does.
So anyway, so you worked on Back in Action, and you animated on that, crowd scenes, and then was there anything else that you did on that before?
Just the boarding at the main shop, the main lot.
Animation, and then you worked for Daryl after that.
Yep. And then that's been about it.
And then you have mainly been working on your own films since then.
Right, and trying to do fine arts painting, and I even did a comic strip last year. The first time I'd ever tried to do a pro comic strip. We didn't get published, but I got paid, which was nice.
Well, it's always nice to get paid. I've met many that don't.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I animated one scene of Private Snafu, which just came out on a brand new DVD.
Terrific.
The complete Private Snafu set. A friend of mine remastered them from the 35 millimeter material. They look really good.
And so how much animation did you do
Just
for
6
that?
feet, little tiny scene that he boarded and he planned out. But it was fun to do, and it's the first scene I'd done in quite a long time.
And I'm assuming you got paid for that.
Yeah, he paid.
Well,
He
that's
paid
good.
like 1972 rates, $100 a foot.
Oh my God. Oh
But
my
that's
God.
better than 30
Yeah. Better than 30.
or free.
Now, I have a wrap-up question.
Okay.
And then we're done.
All
And
right.
it's the one I ask everybody who's done these tag interviews. That is, what are your favorite five favorite animation features, or 5 favorite animation features and television shows, shorts, whatever, but you must have 5.
You mean things that not necessarily things I've worked on, but
No,
just
not
all-time
things
favorites.
you worked on, that things that you watched as a kid.
Wow.
Or have embedded in memory because you say, oh, that really inspired me.
Right.
And everybody comes up with a couple of Disneys and then different shorts. So what are yours?
Right. Wow, favorite features. Well, it varies almost every day. I change the order of them. But I think today I'll say Snow White is my favorite animated feature still. Just because
Yeah.
to me, it moves me so much, even to this day. And I don't know why. Maybe Snow White isn't even that well animated by today's standards, but there's something about her. You care about her. You care what happens to her.
I think the film still holds up in a lot of ways.
I've seen so many other films where the female was animated so much better and had better expressions and better timing, but there's something sympathetic about that character.
Yeah.
I've always really respected that movie a lot. And I guess I love Fantasia. I love the original Fantasia. That's why I stuck so long with the remake. I thought maybe lightning was going to strike twice. But I loved the adventuresome spirit that was there and the chances they took to make it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Walt wasn't even too sure of what he was doing at that point. He just kind of was going from sequence to sequence, wondering what would happen or what they were going to come up with. But it's tremendously free. It's a free imagination kind of thing. I love it. I love just about every sequence in it. And I don't know, Pinocchio, I
3.
guess, would be number 3.
Yeah.
Just because of the beautiful artwork in it, if nothing else. There's never been an animated feature that looked better than that, to me.
Probably the most expensive Disney animated film, minute for minute.
Adjusted for inflation, of course.
Well, adjusted for inflation, but
Right.
yeah, you know, it cost I figured this out years ago, and I did a research piece on it. Costs more than Gone with the Wind.
Wow.
Minute for minute.
Wow. And that was a 4-hour movie.
Right.
Shh. And I guess I really like Hoppity Goes to Town. That'd be number 4. Or Mr. Bug Goes to Town.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's got a lot of energy in it. It's kind of a B picture, as animated features go. But I love the electric sequence where Hoppity's dancing and he gets attached to a car battery and he explodes with color and light.
It was the Flasher film that pretty much closed the Flasher studio.
And C. Bagley Beetle is really Edward Arnold. I love Edward Arnold as a supporting
Who
character.
does the voice?
I think it was a story guy. It was either Ted Pierce or somebody like that did his voice, but I'm not 100% sure on that, so don't quote me.
Number 5.
But well, that's 4. Wow, number 5. Gee whiz. Well, like I say, it's going to vary depending on the day. But I'd have to say maybe Heavy Traffic for me, because that was a freeing experience. Not because it's a great film, but because I loved working on it so much. I enjoyed it. And I liked Ralph's attitude toward it, and the fact that it was autobiographical to some extent on his part. And that gave it kind of a quality that a lot of other animated features don't have. It's almost like a personal film about Ralph's life in a way, done as a feature.
An autobiographical animated feature.
And it's not my favorite because I worked on it, but just because I kind of like what he managed to make out of it, especially when you consider there's no coherent board or I think even a final script on that film.
Yeah.
But he managed to pull it off.
Yeah.
And it's one of his better ones.
Yeah.
So we'll say that's my 5 for today.
Well,
it'll be different tomorrow.
We'll come back a week from now and find out a different 5. Well, Mr. Kausler, it's been a pleasure. I think this is the longest interview that we've done.
Well, you can cut it later.
We don't cut. We just let her rip. So this will go.
Well, there's many
up in
stories.
a week or 2 or 3 or whenever we slot it.
Okay, everybody wake up now. We're almost done. Wake up.
So anyway, this is the latest tag interview, and we're signing off.
God bless you.
From the Animation Guild conference room.